And now we're live,
Oh, wow. Nice.
right? I don't know. Did you listen to any of the other ones that I recorded?
I listened to one about sports.
Okay. If you notice in the beginning of that one, I did like a little quick guided meditation.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
And if you're all right with it, I'd like to do one right now with
Yeah, why
us.
not? Yeah, let's do it.
Um, so this one, we're just gonna focus on breathing. And I'll have you start by just like taking one deep breath and then just relaxing. And that's just to open everything up, get those muscles relaxed. And now we're just going to focus every time you breathe in, you say to yourself and notice I'm breathing in. And every time you breathe out, you notice and say to yourself I'm breathing out. And as this is happening, you notice how the breath is just being pulled into you and then pulled back out, almost like waves in an ocean, where it just comes in and it goes out. And I'm breathing in and I'm breathing out. And it's totally effortless. Thank you. Um, just curious, have you done any mindfulness practices yourself?
Not really. One time when I was at work, they said that it was like good to take 2 deep breaths a day. So I've never really taken more than 2 deep breaths a day unless I'm like doing some physical activity. But one thing that is kind of mindful for me that isn't really like a classic mindfulness exercise is like shaving, because I
Yeah.
shave with just like a half razor blade. So like it's you have to take your time and you have to be slow about it, and it takes me probably like 45 minutes to shave. So like I use that kind of as my like slow down time or whatever,
Yeah,
because if I don't slow down there are
you might cut
consequences.
yourself. Yeah. Yeah, you'd have to be really aware to do to shave with just a razor.
Yeah.
It's kind of like using a straight razor, but
Oh yeah.
different.
No, I don't mean it's just like the half razor blade. Like it's on a shavette, so like the thing the doctor uses. I mean, not doctor, barber uses. So
Okay.
it's
Okay.
it's like a straight, whatever they call it.
Straight razor?
Uh, yeah,
Yeah.
but a lot cheaper, and you know.
Yeah. I obviously haven't been shaving for a little bit.
Yeah, I
But
see that.
when I shave, I use it's like the double-sided razor blades that are just like you can switch them out. I
Oh,
forget what
okay.
it's called.
A safety razor.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
okay. Yeah, that's kind of like the same thing then
it's
too, right?
similar
That's like
except the safety razor has safeguards.
Oh, okay.
Smaller window for error, and harm that might result in that error.
Yeah. Hence
So
the safety part.
yeah, but that's an awesome mindfulness practice. That I think a lot of people probably like. They just use the disposable ones or whatever, or just like an electric one, and they're just like doing it and not being like really aware of where your hand is, where your face is, like what you're doing.
Yeah.
It's just like
Yeah.
something to get done.
Right. I used to use the electric one, and like it would probably take me like 5 minutes to just do the whole thing, and like I just do it, get it over with, and be done. And now I actually have to like slow down, like take my time.
Yeah. Something I've actually recently started doing is taking baths,
Nice.
which like I love them. It's like such an awesome experience. Where I'll put a bunch of the Epsom salt in there if I have it. If not, I'll still just take one. But I lay in there and I put my head under the water, so like just my mouth and nose are out of the water, and I'll spend like 30 or 40 minutes in there,
Yeah,
just
yeah,
like laying under the water, and all you can hear is like yourself breathing.
right.
And
Yeah, I've probably taken like 4 or 5 in the past like 3 years, and it's always been a good thing. But
yeah, I started taking them much more frequently. Like I took one last week.
yeah,
Um, that yeah, it's probably sometimes I'll do it once a month. Sometimes I'll do it 3 or 4 times in a month.
That's actually a substantial amount, I feel like.
Yeah, yeah. And I find that a lot of times I do it if I notice that I'm stressed. It's like I'm stressed and I can't shake this, and it's like I'm not relaxing. I'm at home, I have nothing to do, and I'm still like I feel that tension. I'll just be like, all right, sorry everyone, I'm going to take a bath. Like, do you need the bathroom? Because it's going to be closed for 40 minutes. And they're like, no, like just stop being so grumpy. And I'm like, I know. And then like I get out of the bath and I'm just like in this weird like headspace that is like everything is different when I get out of the bath. It's like there's a noticeable difference. It's not just like I'm sitting there just like dozing off. I come out and I like have a whole new perspective on everything around me. And it's from laying in a tub of water. Like,
yeah, that's pretty ridiculous.
It's something like a lot of people have access to and rarely do, at least not for the same reasons.
Right. Yeah, I have. Like, I moved to this apartment in December, and I haven't taken a single bath yet. I think my wife's maybe taken one since we moved here. And it's like we have a bathtub, but
yeah. I do it with like an intention each time too, of like I'm gonna go relax and reset and like be mindful. And,
yeah.
But yeah, thanks for participating in that little mindfulness breathing exercise.
Oh yeah, no problem. Always down to do something that I don't normally do.
Yeah, that's one of the things I loved about hanging out with you. Is like we were both just like, man, let's see what this is like.
Yeah.
We were open to everything, not everything, but most things. Like, I'm at least gonna try it.
Right.
Which led to a lot of like terrible ideas, but it led to a lot of awesome experiences too. And we definitely learned a lot from the good and the bad choices.
Yep. Yeah, I think learned a lot very quickly.
Yeah. But I don't remember exactly the different things that we had said we might use as talking points. If you don't have any that you want to start off with, I have a question for you.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
I want to know, like, we can talk in depth about all this, but if not, just like, what's the one main thing you noticed about being back in America and about American culture?
It's more stressful.
That's
I don't know.
Funny. It's so funny.
I'd like it to be something else, but I think that would be like the main thing, actually.
Like the fact that that's the main thing, that it's more stressful in America, like the place where everything is fairly easy in comparison to a lot of places of the world as far as convenience goes, and it's more stressful here.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess. like a lot of things are convenient. Like it's really easy to it's much easier to get things, right? Like if I can go on Amazon and get whatever I want in 24 to 48 hours or something, like,
right.
And
anything.
That's easy. Yeah, anything. And in some sense that's really useful. Like when I moved to the Philippines, I needed to get some rock climbing shoes. The only store on the island that I lived on that said they had rock climbing shoes didn't have my size. And when I was like, when are you going to get new shipments? They said, oh, we don't know. And then they literally never got new shipments for the next year or so. So I would have to fly to Malaysia to buy rock climbing shoes. Now, in the past few years, I know of 1 or 2 shops that have opened up where you can go to Manila to get rock climbing shoes, but on how many other islands, like, you couldn't get them. But here I could look up on Google Maps and find a store within a 20-minute drive that has rock climbing shoes, and that would be fine.
Or you could order them and they'll show up at your house and you don't even have to leave. You don't have to go outside.
Right. And ostensibly you could also order them in the Philippines. It's just that they might get lost at customs or something.
Yeah.
So something like that.
If
so
it's
in
not
that
in
sense,
your hand, it might not end up in your hand.
Right. Or it might cost double what they get just to get it released from, who knows. But So yeah, in that sense, it is like way easier to get stuff here. And sometimes to get stuff that works. Things here some generally work better than they do abroad. And some things are actually cheaper here too. Like for example, a computer is cheaper, or something that is going to get charged that's not produced in the Philippines but would have an import tax or something. Like it'll be cheaper here than it would be there. So yeah, I would say here is like it is super convenient to get things. And traffic is better here, but there's also less. Like I live in Newark now, so I have access to fairly good public transportation. But when I lived in Sussex, I couldn't really get anywhere using public transportation.
Yeah.
So, and my wife doesn't drive, so that was stressful. The sense that like I lived in the middle of nowhere and I couldn't. My wife couldn't necessarily get anywhere, but
Yeah, because everything's too far removed. It's at least like a 20, 30-minute drive to a lot of
yeah,
places. Like you're not going to walk that. And I mean, if you're going to bike it, that's pretty intense. Impractical.
Yeah. But if I lived in the country in the Philippines, like there would be some form of public transportation that eventually connected to another form that got me to the city or something. But that's not necessarily true here. But I think the main thing that's stressful here is the speed at which everyone goes. Like everybody's like always going. You're encouraged to work like however long, like
until you literally hate yourself.
Right. Yeah. And things cost more, so you need to always be working unless.
Yeah. How would you compare the sense of safety?
From what? Like the sense of safety from. Ooh, that's difficult because that's a very faceted question. I feel like.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like I live in Newark right now, so I'm probably way more likely to get shot here than there. But there, I'd probably be more likely to get kidnapped if I went to the wrong spot or something like that. But I probably wouldn't die. Like, I don't know.
How about your sense of it? Like how on edge and how aware, and like are you checking over your shoulder, and can you put your guard down the same or more or less in which place?
I don't know because I like to be generally alert when I'm out and about, so I don't put my guard down necessarily. Because a lot of the times, actually, when I was abroad, we were nomadic for a little bit, so we would be in a new place every 2 weeks or so. So it's like if you're just learning what the place is, you're not going to let your guard down, and then by the time you know a little bit of what's going on, you leave. So I don't know. But yeah, I don't know. It's just very different. I think it's like apples and oranges, kind of.
Yeah.
There, somebody might be more likely to take my phone than here, but I didn't have a phone, so I don't know.
Did it get taken?
No, I just never got one.
No, I figured as much.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. It's just it's very different. It's apples and oranges. And so, and also being like a white male, I had some sort of like privilege there that even here I mean, I have privilege here, but there I had like some extreme amount of privilege or something like that.
Yeah,
so
I've heard that
it might
about
actually,
the Philippines.
right? Like I might actually be safer than your average person there. Somebody's gonna think twice about trying to rob me versus robbing somebody else or something like that.
Interesting, man. Us white guys, we've got it pretty good in the world.
It's very absurd. Like,
right?
Yes,
right?
but it's fact.
Yeah. Do you have any idea what that stemmed out of?
Nope.
Yeah.
No,
First ones
I
with
really don't.
guns? Like, I don't know.
So I no, actually, like it probably had something to do with historical technological advances and something about imperialism or something like that. Because I mean, like in the Philippines, they were colonized by so many different places, like the Spanish for such a long time, then the United States for a little bit, Japan, things like that, and so their independence is like fairly new in modern times, like within the last 70 years or so. Um, Might be slightly more than 70 years now, but yeah, I think it's just like history and
And those
technology.
people coming in to colonize it, like the Spanish, they were way more advanced with their like military tactics, I would imagine, or their ability to impose force, maybe.
Weaponry probably, and like, yeah, uh, they would like they could just drive a ship up to an island, have a bunch of people pop out with guns and swords. The natives on that particular island may or may not have had swords, or may have just had spears and bows and arrows and things like that. And so, while there were some like major defeats of Spanish forces, it was less probable than the other way around and things
Yeah,
like
like
that. So,
those islands couldn't support an army that would be able to defend against an army that Spain could land on their shore.
right, and it doesn't help that too. Like there are hundreds of languages there too. Like just because we know it as the Philippines,
Right.
it wasn't one united place. Like it was just a bunch of
A
different
bunch of
islands.
islands that,
Yeah.
yeah, you could live on whatever island and you were on your island and you did that way of life.
Yeah, in fact, it's probably just a single country now because foreigners decided it for them. Like,
We like these islands.
right?
We're going to just lump them together.
Yeah, that happened to Indonesia too now. Like Indonesians don't necessarily think that they're together, like they don't feel like the same group of people, but the rest of the world was just like, you guys are all Indonesian now. um,
I think it's so funny how we throw labels and borders and all of that stuff on things just to like make it easier for us or so we can have different rules and laws, but it's like fairly arbitrary.
it's entirely arbitrary, and I mean we
It's
take it for
subjective.
granted.
It's
It
totally
is.
subjective.
And different countries will draw their borders in different places as well. Like so like between Egypt and Sudan, there are two different places that are claimed by both countries on their maps, but they also draw their maps so that it doesn't intersect in a space. So technically there's a place in between the two countries that's not part of any country.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Go live there.
Right.
It's a neutral zone.
Yeah. Oh, you can't live there though, because it's way too hot. It's like desert, and it's uninhabitable.
Nobody wants that. That's why it's off the
Right.
map. You can have it.
Otherwise, they would have resolved this situation by now.
Right, right.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was just curious what your takeaways were, because I've talked to a handful of people that have either traveled a lot or from other countries, and most of them they say like for how safe you are, and I mean they're not in Newark, but like how safe you are in America, all things considered, how there's like this sense of order. You have all of these conveniences to a point of like extreme luxury, and everyone's complaining and everyone's like expecting you to be doing something more. And how they're like, I don't understand why no one is happy here when they have anything you might want, considering the basic needs of life.
Well, I mean, if you're considering the basic needs of life, like food, shelter, and the lack of dying, then sure. But I mean, you put an animal in a zoo, right, and they have food, shelter, and a lack of dying. they're probably way more likely to live a way longer time than like the equivalent animal in the wild.
Yeah.
But they're stuck doing what they have to do, which
The
is
quality of life is
sit there. Yeah.
not the same. An example, I forget if they were referencing someone or not. I was talking to a friend who has been spending a lot of time in Vietnam, and he said that like America, like at least the town where I live right now, because he had been back to visiting, he's like, this is like Disneyland. It's like all of this stuff. You have access to everything. It's like this wonderful like attraction, but it's all just like being put on by people. It's not like a natural way of living. Everyone's just like pretending because they have all these amazing things. But then my comment was, I don't think I'd want to live in Disneyland. I'd want to be able to leave. Like, turn off the damn music. Like, let me get out of the line for a minute. Like, stop doing all these shows around me. Like, can we just sit and like enjoy what's around us instead of like, we've got all this great stuff. It's amazing. It's amazing. To the point where you're like, can we turn it off? Like, that's like,
Yeah.
it's kind of funny that everyone. I keep bringing this up, but like in America, everyone's working super hard for that easy life.
I mean, yeah, see, that's the thing though. I kind of disagree with working hard for the easy life. Like, yeah, we're working hard for like a life of many conveniences,
Isn't
but
that the
there's a
same? That's what I meant.
psychological. Oh yeah, but oh yeah, no. What I was saying is like you have to weigh the psychological factor into the easy life assessment, maybe.
Yeah, I just don't know that many people are that like complex, thinking about those pieces, self-aware. I don't know how to identify it, but like I don't think a lot of people consider the psychological elements of a lot of the things they do. I think they're
Yeah, I
just
guess.
functioning off of like the inputs of how it, like what they're getting out of it.
Yeah, yeah, that's true.
I think a lot of it's more surface level, and they're not looking at like what's really motivating my actions right now, and what is this going to experientially be like once I reach that type of relationship or social status or economic status. It's just like in their head, they're like, no, more is better, and then I'll be happy.
That's actually that I think that's hitting at something like some sort of root cause to it is always thinking that something else is going to give us a certain feeling or
An expectation that it will be a certain way.
yeah. And I mean, that being said, there's good, there's bad. I don't know. I'm sure like I said, like I felt less stressed abroad, but I also probably had it easier abroad than people who live there too. So I'm sure there are people there who are also as equally stressed out as. It's hard to know.
Yeah, and I think that brings up a great point of like if you look at just America's a really big place.
Yeah.
And then the U.S. Is a really large area with a lot of people, with a huge range of difference in their experience, of their quality of life, of their safety, of their convenience. Like, so even here you say like, oh, America is like, well, are you talking about someone who makes this much money and lives in like suburbia? Or are you talking about someone who's living in the ghetto and they're scratching by and the only reason they have food is because they robbed someone? Those are both in the US. Like that's happening. And it's like, what are you talking about? You have to get more specific than those general claims of like, oh, well, the happiness in America, like, are you averaging it? Or are you pulling like from a certain population? Like, what was your sample for that study?
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, and this is a huge country. Like, if this was the rest of the world, like all the states would be their own countries or something geographically, anyways. Yeah, and each country, each state has like a different vibe is the word that comes to mind, but that's not what I mean. But like as a different collection of people with a different set of
Yeah,
attitudes, a
different
different culture. Yeah,
Mhm.
there you go. Culture is the word I was looking for. And I'm sure experience varies greatly. Like, I went to Baltimore since I've been back, and I wound up driving through this place looking for the Ouija board guy's gravestone, and it was the most desperate looking place I've ever seen in my entire life. And I've seen third
How
world
do you mean?
ghettos. The the people, like, people looked
Like they didn't have life
sad.
in them? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Like they were just grasping on to life.
Yeah, like zombie-ish or something. And it's like I've been in like ghettos and third world countries and stuff like that, and people can be sitting on the ground drinking, but they're laughing with their friends, or they're like there's life in them and things like that. And it's just like, there it was like, wow, this is it was saddening. Like,
Yeah, you
I
could
don't know.
almost feel it too. Just
Yeah,
being surrounded by that. Like there's a presence to it.
yeah. But yeah, I don't know what my point was. I don't remember anymore.
Just that that's happening here in the
Yeah,
US. That like but my life is pretty great. And I also I'm very mindful of it. I
yeah,
notice a lot of the pieces of it and I take time to appreciate them, recognize them, and like probably things that one, obviously some people would take things for granted that I appreciate, but two, some people might find them as like nuisance, that I find appreciation for, like I don't know, cleaning the gutters. That can be an awesome thing. And a lot of people probably rather pay someone to do it and then be all stressed that they have to go work more to get money because they had to pay someone to clean their gutters. Where for me, I can be mindful of it and be like, I'm cleaning this out and it's going to flow better, and I like that.
yeah,
That it's a that same opportunity is for all of my neighbors, but we're not all appreciating it in the same way. That it's like the opportunity is there, and I feel like people, like you just said, you've seen the ghettos of third world countries, and people are smiling and laughing.
yeah.
Would you say on average there's more people who are not smiling here?
That's a tough one. Smile. Okay, so
Okay,
smiling.
that are expressing some sense of joy.
Okay. I don't know. I want to
Okay.
like to make a generalization thing, but smiling itself. It's funny that you brought that up initially, because smiling is like kind of a very American thing. People, especially like Europeans and people I meet, don't smile as much. They'll be like, why are Americans always smiling? And it's just like, we learned to do that. Like, it's we just are always like smiling and stuff like that. But it doesn't always reflect our like greater attitude or whatever. But I don't know. I'd say Americans in general do like being positive a lot. But whether or not how they interact with other people is how they feel on their free time or whatever. I don't know. It's, again,
Yeah,
I
well,
don't.
I definitely would say that they present positively more of the time.
Yeah,
I think most people in the American culture would agree that there's times when they said they were good and they weren't.
yeah. Like I've done that myself too. Like,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
somebody will be like, oh, I'll be having a shitty day. I'll go buy a soda or something, and the guy will be like, oh, how's it going? I'll be like, oh, good.
right, right. Because that's what you say. Because
Yeah,
we're all
yeah,
good here.
yeah.
How are you? Good. How are you? Good. Okay,
Good. Yeah,
now we'll do our interaction and then we'll move on.
yeah,
Whereas it's not. It's it's almost like a habit rather than an actual expression.
yeah.
It's just like a reflex.
Right.
um, and there's I wonder how much of the smiling is like a mirror neuron thing with like children. Just when you're developing those early stages of development, you have those mirror neurons. Like when someone around you laughs, you laugh. Like you do what they do, as so you can like learn about how people interact that you're going to be with.
Yeah.
And if everyone is smiling, and like you think about like parents around a little baby, they're all smiling, like talking to it right over its face, and then the baby smiles. But maybe that's not how it looks in other cultures, but I just haven't seen them raise babies.
Yeah, that's true. Huh. Yeah, that'd be an interesting study or such.
Where they could be more in tune to like the feel that they have, or maybe like the micro expressions around the eyes rather than the cheek muscles as much.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, I think like babies definitely mirror the people around them, and if everybody else is smiling, then they probably will too. And I mean, it could be.
Yeah, that was just a thought.
Yeah.
One of those, I wonder.
Yeah. Perhaps somebody studied it, and perhaps they haven't.
And if they have, I'll read it and I'll share it with you what I find. And if they haven't, hopefully someone does, and they tell me, because I don't need to.
Yeah. So, do you like do this? So you're talking about cleaning your gutters earlier, and how that could be like a pleasurable activity, or I mean, you didn't use those words, but
that's what
I actually, yeah. Like, do you do that consciously all the time, or?
I try to. And when I'm not, is when I like reach that point where I'll all of a sudden become conscious of how I am, and that's when I need to go take a bath.
Okay.
I try to hold this consciously all the time, and so I've been working with kids in the elementary school. Well, I worked with kids in the high school for a year, and then I've been in the elementary schools for the last 2 years, and I'm working with kids that are having behavioral issues and emotional issues. Not just like all kids, or just a wide range. I'm working with this slice of the ones that are really struggling. And for the last year, the basis of the program I was working in was mindfulness, and teaching mindfulness with these other skills and strategies to help you overcome stress in your life. And I have been practicing mindfulness since my undergraduate, because I took some classes and I loved them. And then I explored it and learned about a lot of Eastern philosophies, and incorporated it into my life because it just fit and I liked it. I felt the benefits of it and wanted to keep doing it. But teaching it, like some days I had like 8 or 9 sessions in one day. And every session I started with 2 minutes of mindful breathing. So I was doing it at least 8 or 10 times a day, but I also, when I would walk to the classroom to get a kid or walk down the other hall to drop the kids off, I would practice mindful walking, where I'm aware of walking just like being aware of breathing. And it became like, and this was intentional, but it became something that I was constantly doing. I was aware, but it wasn't like attentive to everything going on. It was just aware of what was going on. So like observing it rather than trying to analyze it. I wasn't trying to like break it down and process what's going to come from this. I was just being present and aware of it. Just noticing myself all of the time and what I was doing. And then outside of that, I could notice other people and what they were doing. And it's pretty funny. If you hit that space, like that mindset, you immediately notice most people are not aware of what they're doing. At least that I've come across. Like most people are not aware of themselves and their actions at that time and their feelings at that time.
That's extremely funny to me because like I've noticed the same thing too. And I'm like painfully self-aware at like all points in time. So like when I'm walking down the sidewalk or something, like I can't help but notice how other people are walking and move myself out of the way to let people pass, or like things like that. Like I'm always like in tune.
Here's a fun thing to try though. If you just keep on your path, they'll go around you and not even know why. They won't run into you. They go right around you, but they don't notice it.
Yeah.
that you could ask them later, like, "Hey, I passed you in the street," and be like, "What? I don't remember." Like, or they'd be like, "Oh
Yeah.
yeah, I did have to go around someone, but it wasn't in their attention." Like, it just like they just go around. It's so funny. It's like fish.
I mean, in a sense, I think biologically that's pretty accurate, but
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know.
Um,
Did this when so you consciously were mindful, but did you do it with any kind of were you thinking that it would affect your mood, or were you doing it just
I
to
have
do
an
it?
intention with it.
Okay, that's
Um,
my question.
and sometimes my intention is strictly to just notice it. Experience. What is my experience through all of my senses, well beyond whatever five we identify? Like anything that I can notice about this experience through my perception, I'm going to try and notice it. Sometimes that's my intention. Other times my intention is I'm going to find as much joy in this, or I'm going to notice how this evolves or reacts or um, feels. Just I pick something about it and then be aware of that. But a lot of the times I just try and be aware. With that's the intention of I'm going to be aware, and whatever comes of this, I'll be aware of that. Um, and I notice that joy comes out of it rather than having an intention of I'm going to be joyful. I can find joy in experiencing sadness, which is almost contradictory, but it's there's this separation, like almost like the duality that you can talk about in philosophy. But this like I experience sadness about something, but I had that experience, so I can have joy of having an experience. It doesn't feel bad anymore. I used to have in my mind this idea of bad, and that kind of dissolves with this mindfulness. There's things that aren't helpful. Can you still hear me, by the way?
Yeah, I hear you
Okay.
fine. Yeah.
Your video
um.
froze.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Doesn't
Wait,
matter though.
is it still frozen?
Your video is. Your audio is good though.
Oh, actually, like my laptop does this thing where the video freezes, and sometimes it does not recover until I reboot. So, do you want me
That's
to
fine.
do that, or are we
You
good?
get to choose. I say
Um,
whichever you prefer.
yeah, it's fine. Yeah, I'll reboot it because otherwise I'll reboot it later. I'll be
Okay.
right back.
I'll share a story about mindfulness.
All right.
Um, when I first was introduced to it, I probably had it introduced to me a handful of times actually and didn't notice, um, just because I wasn't open or ready for it. But when I was in my undergraduate, I think I was a junior. I took some classes, and one of them was the science of psychological well-being. It was an absolutely amazing class. Um, the teacher was absolutely wonderful. The students, I think because of the atmosphere and the content, and also the people who wanted to be in that class, there was only like maybe 20 students, but I don't even think that many in there. And it was only offered to juniors and seniors. And it was like a trial of the class. They didn't know if they were going to add it to the curriculum or not. And I wrote a very lengthy letter about how they should incorporate this and maybe even figure out how to make this a core requirement, but you need to make sure that it had a good teacher. Um, because that class changed my life. It changed my perception on my experience and reality. And it did that through a lot of different ways. Meditation was one of them, but then I realized that I had been meditating a lot anyway. I just didn't hold intention of meditating. I was just hunting or fishing or hiking or doing art, and all of those can be meditations. Welcome back, Will.
Hey, how's it going?
But I was just sharing how I noticed that I had been doing meditation in my life and didn't have an idea that that's what it was through fishing. Like we did a lot of that together, or through art or hiking or just sitting. All of those can be done as meditation, and I did do them as meditation, just didn't know that's what it was. But when I was introduced to more concrete ideas and well-developed and articulated ways of expressing what meditation is and what mindfulness is, I was like, I can do this. I've been practicing this a lot for a long time. And I started to incorporate some of that because it was a little, like I said, more well articulated, that it allowed me to get to a deeper level of it and a higher skill of being mindful. And that changed my whole experience of life. And I think I was always a little more, I don't want to say self-aware, because I think that has a whole bunch of meanings for people, but right. Observant is probably a better word. I was a little more observant than a lot of the people around me. Things could happen where, let's say we were in high school and something would go on, and then you and I could be on opposite sides of the room, and I could look over at you, you'd look at me, and we would both just like laugh and be like, yeah, I saw that. Yeah. And everyone else in the room is totally unaware of it. Just like we were saying that, like, we notice that people aren't aware of what they're doing. That's something that we've had for a long time. I don't know if this is a result of living in my house growing up and what it was like to navigate that, or if it was a natural tendency. I'm not sure. But it definitely happens a lot. Yeah. And then when I found like a practice for that, a more intentional practice for that, and tried it, I was like, I like this. This makes it even more fun. And I feel better when I do that. And I have more control over my life when I do that. And I have more ease in navigating things. There's not as many obstacles that arise because I'm navigating it more smoothly. I'm looking ahead, and it's still instinctual. Just like when you check out, you can get through your work day on autopilot. You can check out and do that. Most people do that a lot of the time. That same instinctual flow of functioning of like you're not really putting effort into what you're doing, it's just kind of happening because you've done it before, is there, but it's with a much greater level of like input, I'll say. Instead of like numbing and dulling everything, dimming it, it almost enhances it, but there's the same level of ease. It's not any harder to get through it. It's just rendering more. It's a higher detail experience.
Okay. Yeah, I think a lot of what you're hitting on is something that I can relate to, except for me, it's slightly different in the sense of earlier when you said cleaning the gutters can be a joyful experience for you. That kind of reminds me of like me right now. Like right now in general, I'm the happiest I've ever been in my entire life. And I'm also doing the most seemingly mundane things that I've ever done in my entire life. But I do so many small things that connect me physically with the world around me. So you came over, you met my wife, we made a pizza together. Mm-hmm. That was the first of many pizzas that I've made.
I've noticed she likes to take pictures of it. And each time I'm like, man, I would never make that pizza because the ratios of what you guys like on your pizzas very different than mine.
Like what?
I like more carbs.
More carbs?
More carbs, okay. More fats.
Well, we started making cheeseless ones because she was lactose intolerant.
So am I.
There you go. Yeah.
It's really inconvenient.
do you use like Dairy Aid or something? Or?
No.
Okay.
I just feel like shit.
She actually started using Dairy Aid, so now we've put the cheese back on the pizza, so that's a good thing.
No.
How about pineapple? Do you do that?
On pizza?
Yeah.
I will. It's not my first choice. I don't know.
But you're not like adamant against pineapple, which is something that I find happens.
Yeah, some people freak out. Don't put fruit on pizza. It's like, whatever. I think bread is an amazing vessel for whatever you want to eat.
Yeah, that's a good
Sandwiches,
point.
pizza, like I don't care. Like put it in a bun. Bread's a great vessel for eating.
Yeah, yeah.
Although the wheat that we use is apparently terrible for us.
Oh yeah, it's so processed and
Yeah, and it's the
bleached.
genetic makeup of it at this point
Uh,
doesn't do well for our bodies. There's lots of negative effects from the it's a dwarf wheat that I guess just doesn't do good things. I've learned enough about it to go, I don't really want to learn more because I'm not ready to give it
right. I'm sure it's
up.
extremely profitable though, so that's
Oh yeah. Well, I'm sure that's where it came from, and it's probably easy to grow, short growing season. Like again, convenience.
right.
Convenience isn't always the best option, though.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and that's actually why I brought this up in the first place is because now I'm spending the time to make the pizza from scratch, make the noodles from scratch. And is it time efficient? No, but what am I going to do with my extra time? Watch 20 more
Right.
minutes of TV or something? And it's
Go
like,
to work more so you have money to buy the noodles.
right? Yeah, and it is cheaper to make them, and they taste better. They takes longer, more effort, but it connects me with the world around me. And the more time I spend doing these things that I could have somebody else do for me,
Things
the
for you,
happier I
though.
am.
It's for you and your life.
Yeah,
You're making the pizza because you want to eat that pizza.
yeah,
But now you
yeah,
also got to make it, so you can do that. But
yeah.
you consume it, and if you put effort into what you're receiving, it has a greater value.
Right. And I don't know if I'm happier because I'm doing these things or I'm doing these things because I'm happier or if it's both and it's a feedback loop into one another. But like just doing all these small things, taking the time to do things, spending less time paying people to do things for me, and my perceived quality of life is so much greater than it was when I was working like super hard at like a lucrative job, like just working, going to the bar with friends afterwards, buying takeout every night or something like that. Like just slowing down, doing everything slow, doing everything for myself. Like I feel I feel good like about it. And I don't know, yeah.
There years ago, I had seen the numbers, so I'm not sure what they are now, but it was at the time 70,000 year income for a family. So for a family, if you had $70,000 a year or greater, there was zero difference in your level of happiness. That was like after $70,000 a year income for a family, there was no change in how happy they were. It was all due to other factors. So that was saying, like, in America at that time, you couldn't buy anything else that would bring you more joy.
Yeah.
And you couldn't work and get paid for anything else that would have you feeling better about it. Like, it capped there, where it's like, nope, no luxuries are going to make you any happier. You have to find it from this point on.
Yeah.
Where there was people with less that had a huge range of like how good they felt, but on average it was a little lower. But that probably relates to people who are happier can make more money than people who are like really depressed probably aren't making a lot of money most of the time.
Yeah. That's true.
Typically, they're not going to work as hard. So I don't think it's the money that brings the happiness. I think the happiness could bring the money.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then beyond $70,000, that's just people striving for more.
Yeah.
That's not them being happier.
Yeah. Yeah. And I actually read that same study as well.
Were the
So
numbers similar?
it was 70,000. That was a couple years ago. I don't know if
Okay, so I
inflation
was
comes
talking
into play at all.
probably like 2010.
I read it probably 4 to 5 years ago,
Okay,
so
so it
it was
hasn't
still
changed much.
70,000.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and neither have salaries. Womp womp.
But
But
there is
yeah.
like a whole bunch of new iPhones since then.
Oh jeez. Yeah, there you go.
So we should all be happier, right?
I don't know, man. So I went to the Philippines and my phone didn't work there. And so I wound up buying one of those $10 stick phones. And I know the conversion rate doesn't mean anything. The $10 phone is a cheap phone there. People are still buying iPhones at regular or greater prices than we buy them here. Like people will spend like 4 to 5 months rent on an iPhone or something for
That's nuts.
God knows what reason. Yeah.
I still don't
Yeah.
get that one.
No, yeah, I don't know. And um but yeah, I had like a stick phone that was $10 and then eventually it just stopped working and then I didn't use any phone at all for like a long time. And I didn't miss it. I missed literally nothing about having a phone. Like my phone didn't bring me joy. The lack of it didn't bring me not joy or anything. Like
Yeah,
the
I don't use. So just yesterday, someone I used to work with, we're working on a project together, and I took my phone out for something. And she's like, "Oh, you got a new phone?" And I was like, "Probably since we worked together, but that was like almost 4 years ago." Um, and I was like, "And I probably got it right." She's like, "Well, I thought you had a flip phone." I was like, "No, but I probably told you that I could have used a flip phone just the same because I text on it and I make calls, and that's it."
yeah.
And sure, it's convenient for like Google Maps every once in a while if I'm in a different town, but I don't really use my phone as a smartphone like most people do. And this one is really old and the screen's cracked and it doesn't always connect. And like all I do with it, I take notes on it now. I got a note taking app. So that's the only smartphone feature I use really. I don't have any social media on it. I text and I call. That's what my phone's for. And I have audiobooks downloaded on it.
Okay.
So I listen to audiobooks. I could do that on an iPod. I could
Yeah.
carry a notebook with me. I've done that before.
Right. Yeah.
That I wouldn't miss it. I would feel liberated from it. I know I would because I hate when people are texting me that aren't around me. It's like leave me alone. If you need something, come here. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
there's that like almost this sense of of importance when like people call and then they're offended that you didn't call them back or answer or like text them back. It's like, oh, I texted you 2 days ago. I'm like, I don't care. Like, talk to me. We're talking now. You're clearly okay. Like whatever it was, if it was that urgent, you would have found me. You're
Yeah.
okay without being able to communicate with me at any time. And people, they get offended by that for some reason, it seems. And I don't say it like that to them. I don't use my phone the same way they do.
I guess I'm lucky enough that anybody who's going to try and contact me knows me well enough that if I don't respond to them, like it's not on purpose, and then they
It's
just
nothing personal.
yeah, they'll text my wife and tell her to tell me something.
Yeah, I mean, we went like a few years without communicating a couple of times.
Yeah, I'm a terrible communicator. Like,
Yeah, and I mean, I I'm okay, you're okay, and we're still friends. Like
yeah,
that didn't damage anything in our relationship that I know of.
right,
Like people be like, "Oh, what's Will up to?" I'm like, "I have no idea." Like, what do you
right.
mean? Like, you guys are best friends? I'm like, yeah, but like, I don't know how to get a hold of him. I don't know where he is.
Yeah, and sometimes it was like not possible to get a hold of me. Like,
Yeah,
like my, I remember when I was abroad, Joe would like text my family, be like, so Will and I are gonna be like out of internet for like 3 or 4 days. So don't worry about anything. Like we can't. They're
yeah,
just not gonna be able to get a hold of us because
yeah.
there are still places in the world without internet.
I mean, there's a lot of places in Montana that I go to where there's no cell reception
Oh yeah,
for a while. There's no services for a long way. Like, and you're just in the mountains. Like, there's nothing
yeah,
around. And I did that plenty of times, and then like I'd get back, and it's like why do I have 9 messages? Like, that's so annoying. Like, and then there'd be a lot of times I get back and I have 0.
Yeah.
But it's just like people are always trying to get a hold of you because it's convenient, because they can. And it's just like,
Yeah.
I don't know. I use texting a lot. I hate calling people on the phone. These video chats I found I'm fine with. There's that next level of connection. I can
Okay.
see your responses in your face to different things, and I
Yeah.
found that's very important for me to communicate. I don't like holding a phone up to my ear. Those are always uncomfortable for me.
That's kind of interesting because I feel like I'm a little different in the sense that like if I really need to talk to somebody, I prefer to just call them and say it all like really fast and not because like I'll like shoot a text and if they don't respond right away, I'll be doing something else. And then like if I get a text while I'm doing something, I won't respond right away because I'll be like I don't want to half-ass my response or something. But then when I finish my other thing, I'll already have forgotten about the text, and
Yeah.
it's like this whole long process just to relay like a small bit of information.
So I'll
So
say I'm
like
the same in that regard. But I just feel like I'd rather you come talk to me.
oh yeah.
I'll send you a
Yeah, that
text
makes
that
sense.
says like, "I'll talk to you on Tuesday."
Yeah.
Texting is if I need to tell you something. Calling is if we need to talk about something or I need to ask you something. Like if it's not a single shot, you shouldn't be texting that. You don't need to have a conversation through text because you're going to miscommunicate. It's going to
Yeah.
happen. You're not going to say everything you need to, and if you do, you're texting too much. My opinion,
That's
obviously.
Well, yeah, it's interesting, and I get what you're saying. And the other weird thing is like I don't physically go to work. So like I literally have not left my house today. And so almost majority of my communication in the workplace is done not via texting but via Slack or like some
Yeah.
sort of internet messaging app because we don't do
When you
video
can use
chats
a
all the time.
computer to type, that's I feel like I like email much
Oh,
more than
okay,
phone
yeah.
calls because
Yeah, that makes
I
sense.
can articulate all of my points and I can take time to do that and I can edit it and read it before I say what I'm trying to say. I can make sure I'm getting my point across. I feel
That
like I'm
yeah,
very effective communicating via email.
yeah.
Definitely in comparison to text and sometimes phone. Phone, it depends on what you're trying to relay. Do you
Yeah, I
need
think
immediate feedback from them or not?
there's something about sending a text that makes you just make it one sentence or two sentences and not be fully articulate or something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Which is fine for some things, but not most forms of communicating, in my opinion. It's like
Yeah, well,
texting is almost like hand gestures.
yeah, like a Twitter or something.
Yeah, there's a cap
Look at
on
what
it.
that's done. Yeah. And now it's so easy to just get everything wrong in 140 characters or less.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I um this is a question I'd love to hear what you have to say about. You would you say you're fluent in any of the languages that you were learning?
No.
Okay.
Nope.
Do you find any of them to be more efficient than the English language?
Oh man, I wouldn't know because I'm not fluent. But there's a lot of cool things like this doesn't answer your question,
That's
but
fine.
it's just an anecdote that I think is great, and it's like when I one day I was hanging out with my wife and we were walking around and I was talking about something because in her language that she speaks, there's sunny and hot is the same word pretty much. Like anybody our age uses the same word for sunny and hot. And I was trying to talk about like if it was like the word isn't it, and it was like I was saying sunny not sunny, like meaning sunny not hot, but it's sunny not sunny or hot not hot. And and I was like, well, what if you need to say it's sunny but not hot? And she's like, it's not sunny but not hot. And
What would it be then?
there, no, but there it's true. Like it's
that's
it's
not
either
a type of weather.
yeah. So it's not gonna be not sunny and cold. Like it's gonna be sunny and hot, or it's gonna be not sunny and not hot. And only when we went to Europe was that the first time it was ever for her sunny and not hot.
Come out to Montana sometime in the winter. Full
Right,
sun
yeah.
and minus 20.
That's ridiculous. But yeah, but like the language doesn't need to accommodate that scenario, so it doesn't.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd say that the
the-
culture doesn't need to. Those might be
Right.
the same.
I mean, they shape
But
language shapes
the
culture, and
language,
culture
I would
shapes
say the
language.
language does need to then, if there's not a way of saying, of getting that point across.
You would
You would
have to switch to English, I think.
Yeah. So there's, it doesn't encompass everything. Whatever that language is. Just like the English language, you can't translate some things from, I don't know, Japanese, for instance. Like they just don't have words for it. So you do your best to make that point.
Right. Like there's a word for the emotion of something being so cute that you want to injure it or squeeze it. And we don't have that, so that's cool. What else? Oh, the genders, not genders. The third person pronoun is gender neutral. So that is efficient. That's more.
That's super
it was
efficient.
yeah, and it's like here
Maybe.
you have to say he or she if you don't know the gender, but then everybody just shortens it to they, which is technically incorrect. But
Right.
now it's like I
And
don't want to
people are
say
in a big
he or she.
uproar and offended about it too.
Yeah, but like I think it would be it's just easy to just have that kind of thing. I don't remember. Oh, you said efficiency was the original thing.
That
Right?
was my original question, because I don't believe the English language is very efficient, but I don't speak any other languages.
Yeah, I mean, if you ever want to look at it, there's two artificial intelligence machines learning to communicate with one another, and they begin to invent their own language, and it kind of comes out extremely weird, but it kind of gets optimized for efficiency of communication. You might find that to be interesting to look
I
at
would
if that's what
definitely
you're interested in.
definitely like if you sent me a link for that, that would be awesome.
Yeah, I'll have to find it. I
Yeah,
can send it like tomorrow or something.
Yeah, take your time. But that's something I'm definitely interested in. I wonder how that would translate over to human exchange of information now versus computer exchange.
Well, we just don't. I don't think we'll ever exist in a circumstance that gives us the ability to optimize our communication for efficiency.
I I don't know. There's different things I've learned about some languages which have inspired me to try and learn them, and then uh, I did a talk with Tim yesterday, and a big thing I talked about is how I'm not good at learning things that are hard. So I gave up on on learning these languages. But like I believe it was like the original forms of Hebrew, Sanskrit, and then there's a couple of other.
Aramaic?
What's up?
Aramaic? Is that what you're talking about?
I'm not sure. I don't recall.
Oh, okay.
I know that Sanskrit was supposedly one of them, but the vibrational expression of the word has a almost like a mathematical equivalent to the meaning of that word. And when you combine them, you can. So I believe it was like if you have the word mother, it equals this thing, and father equals this thing. But if you were to add them mathematically, the sound that would come out using that language would be child, and things like that. Where there was like a math, like a physical world correlation to the vibration of the sounds. Like and then if you look at like Latin or I think Greek and things like that, and again, not well educated on this, but they have like the roots of words. Where the English language, it's fairly arbitrary. It seems like it's been diluted and translated and adapted to meet certain needs so many times that it's gotten away from the actual. When you speak, there's a physical vibration that's happening and the other person is hearing it and feeling it and responding to that. And we've gotten, I feel like, to just where we all agree that what we were saying is what we mean, but we all have our own subjective meaning and definition for all these things. That
Yeah,
I think that there's not a truth in what we're saying. It's just like an agreed upon thing, and we're all kind of wrong. It's different for everyone. Where I feel like there's got to be a language that we could speak that our voice boxes and ears could register and produce and register respectively, that would have an inherent truth in it of like you wouldn't have the misunderstanding because I couldn't have my own definition. I would know what you mean because you said it, and that vibration, like I can't argue with. I would know what that is. There wouldn't be this difference, and maybe that's not possible. But I've always felt like that's a thing that I wish I was doing.
I don't think that will ever be possible. And I want to say that perception, while subjective, is also implemented physically in our biology, and our biologies are different. We all hear different frequencies. Remember that stupid thing? Like, I don't remember.
But if you like, you can set a radio station to a specific frequency, and then if you tune into that frequency, you're always getting that radio station in that area as long as you're around where it's being transmitted from.
Maybe I misunderstood. Wait, do you? But you were talking about talking and hearing, right?
Right.
Or do
and
you mean
the frequency of vibration of the words would have meaning versus the like imposed meaning that we put to the sounds?
But not everybody's able to like, what about speech? Do you mean disregarding like speech impediments and like tonalities and timbres of individuals' voices, or like how could you have something? How could you have a universal language where everybody's voice is at like a different frequency and things like that? Like, I can't speak as low pitched as some of my friends, and I can't speak as high pitched as other ones of my friends.
Maybe you could get closer to that if you practiced it and you had to expand your voice box in those ranges. Just like people who sing have a wider range because they practice that, they exercise that muscle. That we might have a wider range, or maybe you would only need a certain range. Like there's a lot of cultures that when they try and learn a different language, like a lot of the Asian translations into English, they have a hard time with the L sound. Like because they don't have that like muscle memory and like reflex. It just doesn't translate because of what they've been practicing versus this practice. Where if we were all practicing it, there like speech impediments would still probably exist.
I see what you mean.
But I think that we all might be able to practice and exercise within that range necessary. If this is even a possible thing.
Well, yeah, I know exactly what you're saying, and there are sounds in my wife's language that I have trouble emulating or had trouble emulating. Like, for example, the glottal stop is commonly used, and it's just like closing your throat in the middle of a word or something, like an NG sound without a vowel preceding it or something like that.
Yeah.
And if I had grown up learning that language, then yeah, I could do that. And I guess there are already like tonal languages, like Mandarin, I think, has 4 different tones. Like, I don't think they're pitches in the sense of tones, but I think there's flat tone where you maintain pitch throughout a word. There's a falling and rising tone, like I obviously can't do it, and then there's rising tone and falling tone. So I don't think it's a pitch, but I think it's relative tonality that you use, and there could be 4 different relative tonalities per sound or something like that. I don't know if I'm exactly right, but that's my understanding of it. I don't know any of it.
Right. And then if you think, there's a lot of languages that people use. Like we use a
Yeah.
lot that clearly there's a lot of room for
Yeah.
application and interpretation.
Yeah.
It's a fairly universal means of communication, though. And
Language in
yeah,
general.
voice.
Yeah. Yeah.
And all different levels of complexity. And I've always struggled with, if someone asks me a question and I've woken up within the last 2 hours, I usually don't want to answer you unless it's really important, because it takes an incredible amount of energy for me to formulate words. Like this is something that this costs me energy to speak.
Yeah.
I wish I could use some form of communication that was more efficient than coming up with all these words, because it's costing me a bunch of energy. And a lot of times people don't know exactly what I mean, either because I misspoke or they misinterpreted what I meant, with no fault on either end. They just had different definitions and perspective on what I was saying than I did. And then you have to like re-explain it a different way to try and get your point across. I'm like, that's not efficient.
Yeah.
And that just might be human exchange. I don't know. It might not be the language at all. I just feel like there's got to be a better way.
You have me curious now, is like how many different languages exist within other animal species and stuff like that. Like, for example, do like chimpanzees from different regions speak different languages, things like
I'm
that?
sure
Like,
they would. I'm
yeah.
sure. Unless there is this universal that like I wish I was a part of, that they all like have come to use. If there's a more
Yeah.
efficient way, that would be like, that would make sense that that's what would be used. And then if you found a very convenient, easy way of life where you had excess of energy, you could afford to waste some of it on your miscommunications. And that could have happened for a very long time. And here we are speaking English with the slang that we have that could be way off from an efficient means of communication.
Well, yeah, I think that's probably closer to reality than anything to do with efficiency. Like, I don't think there's any driving force or pressure towards efficiency. I think it's all just a random walk that's resulted in what it has.
What do you mean? It's all just a random walk.
Like, things happen for no other reason than because they happen.
And you don't think that there's any influence of efficiency in that?
No.
I would disagree with you on this one. I would love to explore this and see what I learn. Because things like the universal gas law, to me, has to do with efficiency. Entropy has to do with efficiency. It's a balance that's like, no, it's easier if this is distributed. If we have a high positive charge here and a negative charge here, that takes more energy than putting these two together. And I feel like chemical reactions are an exchange of energy, which happens because it's trying to balance itself. It's entropy attempting to maintain balance, I should say.
Interesting. So, I don't think it's trying to balance itself. I think it's behaving randomly and more probable to balance itself after an infinite timeline. So, for example, let's say that let's explore one of the concrete examples that you gave. Like, give me something with a gas or something like that, and then say how you think it would be trying to balance itself.
I'm I'm trying to think of something that has to do with something that seems efficient, and that's why it happens. And there's so many things, and just you ask the question, and my mind goes away from it.
That's fine. I probably asked it in a confusing way as well.
How about like a tree grows towards the sun, or the leaves turn toward the sun? To me, I think that is about efficiency. It's not as efficient for it not to turn its leaves toward the sun. Or blades of grass. People don't notice that grass moves every day throughout the day, and it turns so the most surface area is facing the sun. If you watch a time lapse of grass throughout a 24-hour period, it moves. Or sunflowers, people call them that because you can watch them turn throughout the day and follow the sun. That's, to me, about an energy efficiency.
I actually love that you used that example because I love watching time-lapse videos of plants move because you'll see that they're actually very active, and it's just they move on a different...
I believe intentional due to an efficient way of being. If you're not efficient, you're not going to exist. And maybe this only applies to living things, but I don't think so. I think it stems out of like you could go to the next level down and watch the same types of exchange.
This is where I see where we diverge. Awesome. In the sense that you said that but that doesn't mean it's simple enough for me to explain it.
Well, no, but I'm gonna get something out of this for sure.
Well, you said it might only apply to living things.
I disagree, though. I was saying that just because of the examples I was on. I just don't know the math or science well enough to go to the next levels and explain how the exchanges are just as efficient.
Oh, okay. Because I was going to say that I believe that the living things and non-living things behave in exactly the same way.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Oh, okay. So a blade of grass is sufficiently complex that I can't begin to reason about like the... But let's
there's so many of them too.
Right. Let's take something though like a balloon in a vacuum and then you pop it or something like that.
Okay.
It doesn't, and the balloon has a gas in it. And
I was going to say, well, it would have to have something in it.
Well, it would have to have a gas.
Yeah.
And I guess in this example, it would automatically expand. Okay, so let's say we release the gas, right? And then it's going to fill the entirety of the vacuum, but have more space in between the particles or something like that. And it's not doing that to be efficient. Each individual molecule is going to just move in a direction, and eventually when it stabilizes, it's going to be evenly distributed because the balance...
I would argue that stabilization, though, is because that costs less energy. It finds that place of it doesn't bounce against something and have that opposing force.
Yeah,
it's minimum resistance is what it's seeking.
Right, but at any point in time, it's going to be having a small fluctuation.
It would cost energy to not have it universally equally distributed. You would have to apply something else to the equation.
And I guess my perception and your perception of the same exact situation is different. And mine is that is probable, but probable yet resultant of randomness.
When you say probable, you're saying that it most likely takes force to have something act outside of the law of equal distribution?
I'm saying
with gases in any way?
It's most likely to arrive at an equal distribution.
Why would that be probable?
Because of the balance of forces. And
And the balance you think is random? Because to have a balance, I feel, for me, like by definition, would imply that it's not random. There's a goal to it. To balance.
I just think
that's the goal. Because it takes the least amount of energy. I just think the number of factors that go into the balance and offsetting the balance constantly because nothing is still makes it seem random to me because I can't process that many variables.
I've never tried. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe I'm thinking maybe we should take some time to come up with clear thoughts about this and then get back to it.
Yeah, maybe.
But
I don't know. Have a debate on it. See.
Yeah.
I love challenging this thought because it troubles me. I find things to be incredibly inefficient. And that seems like a bad idea.
Yeah,
because it seems to oppose the natural existence that I've observed. It seems to go against what I see as the underlying function of my existence.
Yeah, and I have the exact same but different opinion in the sense that it goes against everything I know to be true to think that there is some goal to all of the behaviors of these things.
The goal might be, I won't call it arbitrary, but just resultant of the fact that anything exists anyway. But it seems that it's seeking a balance. It's constantly looking for equilibrium because it's not efficient otherwise.
And to me, the equilibrium is just the most probable state of matter at any given point in time. Like, let's say, for example, what's not like an
example I'm thinking of is a battery. It could be a pretty simple scenario to explore. If you have a positive charge and a negative charge, and if we just use charge like ions
Okay, so this would be like the motion of electrons from.
They want to go from one side to the other because then it would be balanced. That's efficient. If you have that pathway connected, it wants to move to the other one. There is that desire to not be packed in with all the other positive electrons.
And I would just say that electrons are opposing one another. Right. And so again, it's more probable for resistance. Them to. So it's more probable for them to move away in this predefined path. This is crazy.
Can you define what you mean by probable?
I see. I froze again. More likely to happen.
Okay.
So I guess
so the reason that it's probable and not expected, what do you have for that? Why is it only probable and not expected? Or would expectation be equivalent to probability with this definition? Or probable, not probability?
Well, I guess the reason I'm having trouble answering this is because it's not actually an accurate reflection of what I think.
Okay.
So the thing I actually think is that everything is a chaotic process evolving exactly as it always was going to. And so I can't work backwards in this mathematical realm and say like um what was the state before this state. I can only know like what this state is going to be after the immediate state. So I can't take any snapshot in time and work backwards and say this is what it was before it. You can only start from the very beginning and work forwards. So like say we started.
Would you say that combats any chances of people going back in time?
I guess. I don't know. I personally don't believe in physical time travel, but obviously you can witness the same event at different spaces at different points in time. Like, for example, gravitational lensing of events around like black holes or something like that. You can see the same event at two different spots at two different points in time if in its lifetime.
Assuming that you didn't move.
Sure, or you could move and just see it at a different spot too.
Okay, fair enough.
But that's not actually going back in time. That's witnessing different photons from a single event. So it's still, yeah. I don't know if we can go back in time, but that would.
Just the your belief seems to be directional of your understanding of existence.
My understanding of existence is directional.
Okay. I have always kind of observed it as similar to like a chemical reaction, where it is moving in a direction. The reaction is happening, and it is using up this for that, and it's exchanging, and it's evolving, and it's changing, and that would, I feel like, not be in opposition to the belief that it is chaotic in the sense that it is almost, you would probably argue, as predetermined. I guess I could agree with that too, with the fact of there's too many variables. There's an inconceivable number of variables for me to try and understand that influence the interactions of these different, I'll call them, chemicals in this reaction. And that applies for all levels of it, of physical matter, of people's experiences, of our interactions, of all of it, everything that's happening.
Yeah, so in that sense, I would agree and say that even though I would believe it to be predetermined, I think it's still unknowable, like from a human perspective. But like you said, there's too many variables. But let's say, for example, you were to somehow miraculously be able to divine the position and velocity of every single particle in the universe at this point in time, then you could perhaps know the exact position and velocity of every particle in the universe at the next time interval, whatever that means.
Assuming you knew the rules that they abide by and influencing each other and how they change.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
So it's more than just knowing all of it. It's knowing then how it'll interact with the ones next to it.
Right, but then you could also simplify it too. Like you don't have to know how carbon interacts with oxygen. You could just know how quarks interact with quarks.
That would be enough, assuming quarks are at the base.
Well, I mean they're not at the base. I think now they're subatomic particles or whatever. But
right, and I think that'll continue to happen as far as humans can. until we get the truth.
But I'd like to think of all these things as layers of abstraction that are designed for our understanding. Like, for example, there's no such thing as hydrogen or helium. There's a collection of smaller particles that we identify as hydrogen and helium.
When they act in a way together.
Right, yeah. And they are probable to interact that way together
based on their pattern.
Yeah, and I would like to go so far in my perception of the universe that it's it may be localized to our space-time density. Like, nobody's to say that all the chemicals that exist here on Earth would exist on Jupiter or exist in the center of the sun. And we're seeing that too. Like, we discover new states of matter like plasma or something, and there's just more matter and time in different places.
Yeah, I always find it funny when like there will be some well-respected scientist who makes like a claim of like, and we're confident that we know all of the elements. I'm always
Yeah.
like, okay, well now I'm not going to listen to you with all that weight.
All
right. And really, anyone with extreme confidence in understanding of reality, I'm skeptical of.
Right.
Because
And
no one's been able to explain things well enough to me to respect their confidence.
And that is also something I struggle with myself, is like, so this belief in determinism or something, it kind of affects me in the same way that perhaps something like a religion would affect somebody else, in the sense that it's internally consistent paradigm with which to understand the universe around me, and it kind of gets rid of the need to ask too many further questions. So it has reached like an internally consistent state that,
you know,
in
what,
some
though?
ways is detrimental. Yes.
That mindset's very energy efficient.
Yeah, exactly. And you know what? Screw it. I'm on board. Everything's leaning towards energy efficient. I don't know. To me, I don't like the words particles want to be efficient. I don't like the words efficient. What I would want to say is that this stability or equilibrium is a byproduct of the way particles behave in this region of space-time. I would like to think that it's not the goal, but
that does not go against any of what I'm trying to convey. And this brings me back to, I wish I had a better language of communicating my ideas.
Yeah.
That's essentially another way of saying the same argument I was trying to make.
Yeah, so it's very well that we could be talking about the same thing, except I would tend to see it as a symptom rather than the root cause.
I don't know that I would say it's the root cause, but I do think that it is tied in with the nature of how it's happening. It seems to be inherent in the design of what's happening. I haven't found the absence of this interaction, I'll call it, behavior. I haven't seen the absence of this behavior on any level I've explored.
So there's a few things that make me uncomfortable about it, but I'm pretty sure we're on the same page by now. But like, the thing is that equilibrium isn't a final state. It's
right.
Equilibrium is dynamic.
Yeah.
It's a bunch of things happening. It's a way for us to understand and categorize a larger amount of particles, right? Like, you could have particles at equilibrium and they're all in different states, but they average out to something from our view of them.
Yeah. And I guess maybe a better way of describing it is there's a constant motion towards a path of least resistance.
Right, but what happens when you hit it?
Hit what?
The amount, like the minimal energy.
That I feel like everything would have to be moving in the same direction at that point, or not be moving at all.
Are you familiar with van der Waals forces?
Not by name anyway, and if I am, I forget.
Okay, so like, for example, let's say we have a bunch of water molecules or something, right?
Mm-hmm.
And as a whole, let me just make sure I'm describing this right. So you can kind of think of as a whole a water molecule to be chargeless
Okay.
outside of itself. Like
Okay.
the amount of electrons and protons are the same or whatever.
It is balanced in its self.
Yeah, and it's been so long since I talked about chemistry. Like I'm sure I'm not 100% accurate on this, but the point is that as from an outside view, you can view. Wait, this I don't even think this is right. Because the shape of it, right? Like there's charges that you can experience from different sides of it or whatever.
Right.
And I think that's something completely different. But the point is that like van der Waals forces is something that is small fluctuations in charge seen in specific points of a bunch of molecules that otherwise would not be charged, but they're constantly fluctuating in equilibrium. So charges are arising and falling in different places over a field of particles that's otherwise in equilibrium. And it's just geometric in nature.
Yeah, almost like it's oscillating within certain bounds.
Right, exactly.
And if it goes outside of those bounds is when it would no longer be in what's described as in this scenario as equilibrium, right?
I guess. Yeah, I don't know. It's hard because like if it hits like the most average it can be, for a second it has to fluctuate outside of that average and then move back towards the average. So in the seconds that it's like fluctuating back outside of the average, it's clearly not working towards being the average in that brief second of time or something, even though it rebounds
because it
right
has
back
a
to it right
direction
away.
to it, or a momentum or a movement. I think momentum would be most accurate for what I'm trying to explain, because once it hits that point, it had a force moving it into that point, right?
Right.
And that
Except
force
it's
was a little greater than what it needed to get there, because it was coming from a greater force before that in the opposite direction.
right. Except it's never gonna just stop in the middle. Like it's not gonna
Right.
rebound back and forth.
And that's something that always bothered me when I was in like early high school chemistry. I was like, well, why don't they all just stop?
Yeah.
Why don't the electrons just get sucked into the nucleus?
Well,
And then you have a ball with no charge. You
I
just
guess
get bigger balls of no charge.
Right. One thing that really stuck with me when I think we had Kabelmeyer's class, and did we have to were you in the class where we had to, I don't know which class it was, that's why I don't know if it was one of those AP ones that we took together. But we had to read a book before class, and it had like a bunch of different like science, Rudolf Clausius, and like the entropy is always increasing.
I will tell you another thing I just said in this talk with Tim yesterday. I haven't read nearly any books in my whole life.
Really?
Really?
That's crazy.
Yeah, definitely less than a dozen.
Huh.
So if we had a reading for that class, I definitely did not do it.
Oh, okay. But the takeaway was that like the second law of thermodynamics is that the entropy of any reaction, the net entropy is always increasing, which implies that eventually the universe will reach a heat death where there's no more usable energy in the universe, and everything will become stasis.
Do you agree with this, or can you defend that side? Because that doesn't make sense to me right now.
I've always just took the fact that entropy in something was always increasing for granted, and then had the inevitable heat death of a solution as the
What is this
result of
heat
that.
death then?
Everything reaching equilibrium, pretty much.
and being really hot because all the energy within it has transmuted into heat, which was lost through the exchange.
I mean, by really hot, if you mean like 4 degrees Kelvin, then sure. You have to understand that in the scope of the universe, like there is a lot happening right where we are. So things here are much hotter than the average of the entire universe would be.
That's funny.
But yeah, I mean, in that sense, what you're
so
saying
essentially
is
there wouldn't be
right.
there wouldn't be any contrast next to itself. That you call it a heat death because there's no difference in energy. There's nowhere for the heat to move that's not as hot as where it is.
So I guess in that sense, everything you're saying is exactly correct, and things are working towards equilibrium, which is entropy, and everything's going to stop happening.
And how does,
So,
since you're familiar with that concept, how does that relate to the initial stance you were telling me you hold on existence?
I mean, it's still internally consistent.
Okay.
But now that I understand that the terminology you were using doesn't have the same connotation that I attribute to it, I tend to agree with you.
And I absolutely love the conversation we had before this topic.
right?
Because the irony is not lost on me.
Yeah, that's pretty good. Well, there you go.
Yeah, I really wish I had a more efficient. Wow, and again, using my definition of words, I wish I had a better means of communication.
Yeah, I mean, I guess practice makes perfect. No, not really. Practice makes better.
It like we spent a long time for us to realize that we both already agreed with each other.
Yeah, that's true. But the other thing is I haven't talked about this in a long time, so like it.
Have you thought about it in a while?
I mean, I think about it every day, but I don't have to pull it apart.
Yeah, most people, one, aren't able to do that with me. And two, some of the people that are able to do that with me don't want to. Like, no, that's too deep, man. I don't want to get into that shit. That'll just like upset me for the rest of the day. I'm like, what? Yeah, that'll like mess with my head. It's messing with my head every day of my life. You don't want to talk about it? And again, I think that's another reason why like I valued our friendship so much was you were someone who not only were willing to but had the ability to explore complex topics, and you had more information on a lot of them than I do. You're definitely more well read. That like,
I've read more than 12 books.
I believe it. I think most people have. I know, like, there were kids in the elementary schools where I was like offering counseling services, and the kids that are like 8 and 9 read that many books this month. Like,
yeah, actually, my wife made it a goal last year to read 1 book a month, so 12 books. So she's read as many books as you have.
I will say, in defense of this seemingly ridiculous claim, I have listened to a lot of books in recent years.
That's comparable. That makes sense.
And I've spent a lot of time. I do read things like journal articles.
Okay, yeah.
And like research publications. I'd rather listen to a lecture, though. I've listened to countless lectures. Handfuls of audiobooks. So it's not like I'm devoid of information, like inputs. I just don't do it through like reading of printed text.
So it sounded a lot more severe than it was.
Right. But at the same time, most people have read more books than I have as far as looking at them and reading through them. And a lot of them might be things like fantasy or like Game of Thrones and Harry Potter and all that stuff, which I have zero interest in reading a book on that stuff. That is a waste of my time in my mind. Um, where sure I could watch the TV shows or movies or whatever they have, but like that doesn't even do it for me. I want to know something that will help with these existential struggles in my mind.
when when we were in high school, I didn't watch TV generally because I felt it was a waste of time, and I only read nonfiction. And this, I started watching TV or movies a lot in college a little bit, but I still only read nonfiction. And lately, I've started reading fiction and watching TV, and I love it.
Awesome.
Yeah, so I think, but I also don't really. Like I said, like once you hit this weird internal consistency, I don't really necessarily feel the need to go out and solve any problems of the universe or whatever anymore. I just kind of take joy in the simpler things.
Right, and that's the mindfulness piece for me, is just enjoying the process,
Yeah.
whatever it may be, just being present in it and enjoying it. But there's this other side for me that like I'm curious. It's like there's a button that says "Do not push," and I want to go touch it and see what it does.
Yeah. I'm trying to.
I'm not content with the fact that I'm alive. It's too weird for me to just be like, yeah, that's of course I am. No, it's a little too. One, it's very consistent. Two, I don't have any conscious memory of choosing it. Like it's just a thing I've found myself in, and it has all of these like consistencies around me that I can't seem to escape. Like gravity hasn't stopped functioning when I'm awake. Like, and I wake up wherever I fell asleep. Like all this stuff keeps happening, and I'm like, what is going on? Like, why am I here experiencing this? And maybe it is just like a predetermined, like this is just the way the reaction is happening. It's like, well, what? This is weird that this is coming out of it. I'm not content with that. Like, I want to know how it works and why it works. That troubles me. And then something else that troubles me is the fact that other people don't seem to care. Like you have like you must have some level of certainty about the fact that you're alive and why you're alive, that you're comforted by. Otherwise, you'd be freaking out like I am every second of the day.
I guess I kind of view it as I have at least one plausible mechanism as to how this came to be, and I don't think that there will be any actionable large developments to reevaluate within the time I have. So yeah, it's totally possible that some quantum phenomenon could come out that totally blows apart like this idea that I have that subatomic particles behave in a deterministic pattern, which then result in atomic particles behaving in a deterministic pattern, which then cause atoms and then chemicals and then cells and then humans to behave in a deterministic pattern. But do I think that's going to happen in the next 50 years in a time frame that I could use to reevaluate it? I don't know.
How I would love to get your opinion based on what you just shared of things like when people have an out of body experience when they were like in a coma or a car crash or something.
You mean like right now? Oh, like it's. I would say it's like if the, in my opinion, the brain is a chemical process playing out. It's an artifact of perception with lack of input from the other chemical processes that you'd normally be affecting this reaction that we coined consciousness. Like,
So you say
but
that it's like a dream inside of their brain. It's not actually their consciousness outside of the body.
right, yeah.
Okay.
Like a dream is this process that is our cognition occurring without necessarily the same inputs that it receives on a daily basis. Like no sight because your eyelids are closed. And so it's not bound even by our experience of time. Like dreams are much faster than actual reality. Like you
Yeah.
can dream, but
Much more
there's
time
less.
can pass than what's happening in where your physical body's sleeping.
Yeah, but with a lot less detail too. Like it's this process run wild without any of the normal inputs that it receives. So I think it's probably similar. I mean, and depending on how comas actually happen, or I'm not willing to say what mechanisms come to this process, but I can totally see how that is a plausible explanation of it. Which I mean, should I be content with just saying, "Oh, this could happen," so therefore, no? That I mean, that's not necessarily really scientific, but I don't need to know everything for a fact, and nor do I have the desire or.
I don't expect like currently at this point in my life, I don't know that I know anything as fact.
Right, exactly, yeah.
So I definitely don't have the desire to know everything as fact. There's a lot of things I don't care about at all.
Right.
But the reason I asked that is I had an experience around 2011, maybe 2012. I think it was 2011 that I don't know how to explain it. And that's one of the things that has me feeling like my current ability to perceive my reality is extremely limited. Maybe I'll call it inaccessible due to my lack of exercising or practicing it. And the experience that leads me to make that claim is I had a friend who was in a car accident and rolled the car a whole bunch of times and went into a coma and was on life support. And I wasn't that close with him, but I had hung out with him, I don't know, half a dozen times maybe, because he was a friend of a friend. And I, being not very close to him, for whatever reason, I thought he had like come off life support and then died at some point. But apparently that's what my truth was. That's what I had thought. I was wrong, but that's what I had thought. He had come off life support, but he didn't die. But I thought he did when he came off life support. And however many months later it was, he died. And there was this night I had this super, super lucid dream. But it wasn't like I was the mastermind creating it. I was just very present and aware in the dream. It was very real. It wasn't like I woke up and like, what was I dreaming about? I woke up and was like, whoa, this is real life? That was way more real than this. And it was me talking with this person. And we were talking about a bunch of stuff, and he was talking in a way healthier way, a way more open and honest and caring way than he ever had when I had known him, because he struggled with a lot of mental health issues, just like anyone, but he didn't have the best skills for navigating that. But when I was talking to him in the dream, he was like really kind, really open, really understanding. He seemed way more intelligent. But I knew it was him. It looked like him. We were having a conversation with the knowing of each other that we had, and it was as like more real than this exchange for us right now. It was totally real in the sense that like as if we were in the same room, and I could reach out and touch him type of thing. And then I woke up and I was like, "What was that? That was weird." And then not an hour later or whatever, my friend, who was the person I met him through, calls me up. And in my mind, I'm like, dude, I just had the weirdest dream about this guy, and now Trevor's calling me. I was like, that's weird. And Trevor's like, hey, I just want to tell you Mike just died. And I was like, what? Mike died a while ago. And he's like, what? No, he like just did like an hour ago. And I was like, I freaked out. And I was like, what do you mean? I thought he died a few months ago. He's like, no, that's when he came off life support, but he just died an hour ago. And I was like, dude, you're freaking me out because I just had this dream. And then he got all freaked out and he's like, I called Matt first. And Matt told me he had this weird dream where Mike was there and he was talking to him. And it was like, what is going on? And I still like, I don't have a way of understanding that experience. It's outside of anything that I've been able to find that can explain how something like that could happen.
Yeah.
It seemed beyond coincidence. Of just like random happenings in my mind that I had this experience in line with this timing of his death, as well as someone else had that same experience that I didn't know about. And the person I told also heard it from this other party. And then like, so it's not like we were trying to play tricks or trying to be intertwined on it. It was very weird. The fact that it all happened, that for me right now, I can't just be like, oh, and it's just all in my brain. Maybe it is, but I feel like that there's so many, like, I think the human ability based on our receptors for processing information, or inputs, I should say, is so limited. Like, there's so many other animals that have other receptors for sight or for sound or for vibrations of things that I think I'm extremely limited in my ability to process information. That there could be so many more complex things going on that I'm not going to get to know if I always perceive it through my eyes and my ears.
Right. But you could also have, I mean, we learned that we have 5 senses or something like that, but that doesn't need to be true.
Right, and that's what I mean of like I might have these other senses for things, but I definitely don't have a lot of scientific foundation behind those other senses.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, I see what you're saying.
And
Yeah.
that's one of the things that troubles me of being content with the amount of information I have on existence.
Yeah. Yeah, that's crazy. And I have I understand the feeling because I have similar things like that I can't explain concretely or anything, and I don't try to.
Why not?
I'm not gonna be right.
Okay. Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
The reason I try to is only so I can try and understand it better. I know I'm not going to be right.
Yeah. I see what you mean.
And that's one of the reasons that I like having these talks. Like this whole podcast thing has stemmed out of me just wanting to explore my understanding of things more with other people who I've interacted with. Like, I've had lots of great talks with you.
Yeah.
We've talked about lots of different things in depth. And for me, that helps me understand my reality more. Am I right on it? Sometimes, a lot of times, no. Like,
Yeah.
especially when we were younger exploring things. Like,
Yeah.
I didn't know as much in high school as I know now.
Actually, yeah, this is like this actually brings up something because this is kind of sparking a curiosity a little bit in the sense that in one sense it would appear as though time is linear, but in some ways when I've had these phenomenon that you're describing, like you having that experience where something happens and then it seems like such a coincidence, I was always wondering if it could be that time is actually feeding, like something that happened in the future is feeding back to the present, and then
Yes.
and so I would like to explore that more, I guess. But
I've actually been coming at that with a stance that I didn't always hold in the past recently. Like, I've been exploring that exact concept recently a lot. And we'll say that my perspective on it's a little different than it used to be when I tried to play with these different ideas, and it's so troubling of how time could be in a loop where it's like constantly like the past might be dependent on right now.
Yep. Yeah, I've actually thought that sometimes, since like it could be deterministic in both directions. Like,
Yeah, which makes the equation much more troubling for me because I had always viewed it as a line in a linear fashion where it might still be linear but multi-directional at the same time. Or maybe it's one direction and like the beginning is always the point of perception. I don't have a good way of understanding it.
so it's clear already that space and time are intertwined, and it's clear that in some senses space and time can be orthogonal dimensions in
Can you define that for me?
yeah, like orthogonal, like only intersects at one point. So for example, like the x and the y axis on a graph are like orthogonal.
Okay.
So for example, in space time, the concept of all four dimensions like x, y, z, and time, in our current understanding of it, the more you move through space, the less you move through time. The more you move through time, the less you move through space. This can be seen in the sense of a photon, for example. A photon is moving as much through space as we believe to be possible. It's moving through space at the highest speed. Yet, between the point that it's released and the point that it hits, it experiences no time. The opposite would be something that stays perfectly still. Actually, that's harder to conceptualize. So, well, we can use this with a concrete example. The amount of time that you experience is directly proportional to the square root of the quantity of 1 minus your velocity squared over the speed of light squared, roughly meaning that the faster you go, the less time you experience relative to something moving less fast as you. So for example, if I hop on a plane and you sit in your house and I fly around the world a couple times, I will experience a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a second less than you have.
Right. And then if you increase that velocity, that experience difference grows.
Yeah, exactly. So it's clear that time is relative, but it's unclear if you could have a path that creates an artifact that influences something that happened before it.
Yeah. And have you heard of the whole internet uproar about like the Mandela effect?
I'm unfamiliar with that terminology.
Oh, wow. So apparently there was a pretty convinced population of people that they went to Nelson Mandela's funeral because he died in prison. And that was their reality. They knew that happened. And then apparently the rest of the world was like, nope, you're nuts because he got out and all did this and that. And here's pictures of it. And so it became this whole theory that like no history changed based on whatever people decided. But do you know the books with the family of bears that's like elementary level reading books? Starts with a B.
Bearstein Bears?
Yes. And the reason I didn't tell you the name of that was because that's one of the things that people attribute to this whole Mandela effect thing. Is how did you pronounce it or remember it being spelled?
I've never actually read the book, but Bearstein,
Okay.
so like Bearstein.
Right.
I guess.
And that's how I remember it. Those were some of the books I remember like learning to read with or whatever when I was young, or first remember reading anyway. If I learned to read with something else, um, and there's a whole bunch of people from our generation who have that same belief and memory, but it's apparently the Bernstein Bears, and spelled with an A.
Oh my god! Wait,
And
no,
there's this huge population of people that are like, that's not true. But if you find any picture of those books or any of those books, they're all spelled with an A.
I just googled it. Oh my god, that's weird, man.
And there's a lot of people that are like, that's not right. And then there's a handful of other examples of that, of like the movie Shazam or Kazam or whatever with like the genie. Are you familiar with that at all? Probably not if you didn't watch movies as a kid.
Nah.
But there's I forget the guy who was supposedly in it. But I guess it was Shaquille O'Neal instead, and everyone was like, nope, that's not who it was. Or it was the other way around. I don't remember. But there's these little things where people are like, that's not how it happened. I know that's not what happened. But if you look at any photographs or current artifacts, if you will, of that, any concrete examples of it, like you go get one of the Bernstein Bears books, it's got an A on it. And it'll claim to have always been an A. Even though there's a majority of the population recalls it happening a different way. And then it's like, is this a falsity in our recall? And then there's like a global agreement based on whatever things that happened. Or was there a change in the timeline that's part of the current timeline of someone's life, where something in my past is actually different than it was when I was living it in my present.
Right.
And it's messed with a lot of people.
That's the craziest. That Bernstein Bears. That's the craziest thing that's happened in a while, I feel like. He's like, I remember the Berenstain Bears, and maybe it's just because I don't want to think that they would name Berenstain.
Right, and maybe everyone pronounced it the Bernstein Bears because it was easier to pronounce, but it was always spelled with an A. But like, I have a memory of it being different. Yeah. Which when that was the example, when that example was presented to me, I'm like, no, it's this, and they're like, nope, look here, it's that. And I have a really hard time accepting that. And they're like, yeah, I could just remember it wrong. I remember a lot of things wrong, but that one seemed so weird that it's like and I was so convinced in it, along with a lot of other people,
right?
That is just like, what? What's going on here?
So the first time that the first thing that I recall in my life that happened to me with this is, I remember my sister and I used to go horseback riding at my aunt's house like every Tuesday or something. And I normally loved it. I loved doing it, whatever. And then one time my mom was like, all right, get ready to go. And I just started flipping out, like throwing a tantrum, like an unbelievable tantrum, like the kind I've never had before, or anything like that. And she was like, why don't you want to go, blah, blah, blah. And I had no idea why I didn't want to go, but I didn't want to go, like, at all. And I hated the idea of it. And so, I mean, well, I'm in second grade, so we wound up going or whatever. And that time, the horse threw my sister off of the horse and stepped on her head, and she like went blackout, like was totally knocked out, unconscious. There's like a big like hoof print and like the thing, and we're riding a horse, so like we're out in the fields or whatever, and the grown-ups are yelling at me to go call an ambulance or something. I don't know how to call an ambulance.
Right.
I'm running,
especially when
around,
everyone's in chaos instead of calmly explaining to you what to do.
Yeah, and so like I'm running around trying to figure out how to call an ambulance. Pretty sure I just ran around not being helpful for like a long time until somebody got it done. And then like push comes the shove. I was like, that was really weird. Like, I hated the idea of going that day for like no reason, and then that happened. Like,
right.
And
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 if it had happened to you where the horse bucked you off, you can make the argument, well, you were in a bad mood, you didn't want to be there, and the horse picked up on it.
right,
But
but
it
I
wasn't
didn't have
you.
anything to do with it. Yeah, and like I never considered at the time that there was
Some
like
correlation between the two.
feedback. Yeah, but after enough things like that happened, I was like, huh, like maybe there is some sort of feedback or something like that. Like,
Yeah, there definitely there's very curious happenings that'll happen either simultaneously or in a way that is like it seems to me to be beyond a coincidence. Based on
yeah,
like statistical probability, this was so unlikely, and the timing of them in congruence with each other has me questioning my understanding of how things work.
yeah. All right, so I'm definitely have some more things to look up.
Likewise.
Yeah.
um, I'll ask you with it. We've been going at this for looks like over 2 hours already. What is
Oh,
your
word.
timeline looking like? Nope.
You mean?
uh,
Wait, you meant like?
on the most menial, like human, normal conversation in America way. Like, what do you would you like to continue or wrap up?
I guess I should probably get going soon because I told my wife I'd watch a movie with her tonight. But
Let's use this as our time for
good.
reflection and then closing.
Yeah.
This seems like a nice transition point or holding point for until next time.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
um, any takeaways or main things that stood out to you?
Well, I realized that I can't remember why I decided that time was linear, and I need to go revisit that.
Hmm.
That's like the biggest thing I can think of.
Yeah, the biggest reflection I would have of this one, it was just again highlighted to me how frustrated I get with the means by which I know how to communicate. Because
Yeah.
again, to not use these words because they're going to be misunderstood, but like it doesn't seem efficient to me. We talked in a lot of circles for a long time to realize that we already agreed on stuff. Like that's
Right.
not efficient. um, but I think we got something out of that at the same time. Like the energy expenditure versus what I've been able to process mentally, I think are one's greater than like the output was greater than the input. Where a lot of times I could have conversation with people and then the output of the energy cost me for that. What I get in return does not equate to what I put into it. So thank you for that.
Oh yeah.
Which kind of goes outside of the understanding of how energy transfers. So we could talk about that next time too. But a big takeaway for me is that like I guess I've known this, but it hasn't really stood out to me. Is that like I'm very uncertain of
Yeah.
most everything.
Yep. Same.
I'm less certain than I thought I was. And it's funny how sometimes, like, I'm fairly confident about some things where now I'm like, how could I have that level of confidence if I'm so uncertain about everything else? That I'm definitely going to be checking myself on that.
Yeah, like that's a good point because like I literally like I know I've thought about this before and I arrived at a conclusion, but I obviously can't remember the process that got there, and so
Yeah.
I'm less certain now than I was like 2 hours ago. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
This
Yeah,
was
thank
an
you. That
awesome
was
way to
great.
spend this
Yeah,
evening for me. It was awesome catching up with you.
yeah, dude. It's I got something to think about now. It's gonna be great.
And I'm going to think about that plus a whole lot more. Until next time.
All right, yeah. We can revisit, see what we come up with.
Revisit and also explore deeper.
Yep,
All
there
right.
you go.
Thanks, Will. And we're
All
off.
right,